The stars burned in the darkness of space, and among them, civilizations were dying. For 15 long years, the Galactic Council had been fighting a war they were slowly losing. The enemy was the Vorath Empire, a collection of brutal species who believed that strength gave them the right to take whatever they wanted. Across half the galaxy, worlds burned and populations were enslaved or killed. Captain Taiwan stood on the observation deck of Monitoring Station Olympus 7, watching distant flashes of light that marked another battle hundreds of light years away. His reflection stared back at him from the reinforced glass, showing a tired man in his early 40s with short black hair and the kind of face that had seen too much suffering even from a distance. "Another one?" asked Hannah Park, his communications officer. She was younger than Tay, barely 30, with sharp eyes that missed nothing on her screens. "Looks like it," Tay replied. "The Council lost 3 more ships today, according to the broadcasts." Soon Kim, their tactical analyst, shook his head as he studied the data flowing across his monitors. "They keep using the same strategies, the same weapons. The Vorath adapt, and the Council just sends more ships to die." It was true. Humanity had been watching this war for over a decade, ever since Earth had achieved faster than light travel 40 years ago. When the Galactic Council had discovered humans and invited them to join their alliance, everyone on Earth had been excited. First contact with alien civilizations, a chance to join the galactic community. Then Earth's leaders had learned about the war. They had seen the casualty reports, the destroyed worlds, the endless cycle of violence. And they had made a choice that surprised the Council species. Earth had said no. Ambassador Yumi Choi had stood before the Council Assembly and delivered Earth's decision in clear, simple terms. "Humanity thanks the Council for their invitation," she had said. "But we must decline. We will remain neutral in this conflict. We will trade with anyone who wishes to trade peacefully. We will ally with no one. And we will defend only our own people and our own worlds." The Council members had been confused. Some had been insulted. The Pelthian representative, a tall being named Ixara with blue skin and 4 arms, had asked the question that many were thinking. "You refuse to stand against tyranny? You would let innocent species suffer while you hide behind your neutrality." Yumi's response had been calm but firm. "We will not hide. We will simply not participate in your war. Humanity has fought enough wars on our own world. We know their cost. We choose a different path." The Council had accepted this, though many species looked down on humanity after that day. To them, humans were cowards. Too primitive to understand the stakes. Too weak to fight. They traded with Earth because human goods were cheap and human colonies were productive, but they did not respect them. What the Council did not see was what happened after those meetings. They did not see Ambassador Yumi return to Earth and meet with Admiral Jin Lee, the head of the United Defense Fleet. They did not see the serious conversations in secure rooms, where humans talked about the lessons they were learning from watching the Galactic War. Admiral Jin Lee was a woman in her 50s, with iron gray hair and eyes like cold steel. She had spent her entire career preparing Earth for the possibility of alien contact. When that contact came with news of a galaxy-wide war, she had not been surprised. She had been ready. "They think we're afraid," she told her officers after one of Yumi's council meetings. "Let them think that. Fear makes people careless. Contempt makes them blind." Under Jin's direction, Earth's shipyards worked day and night. New ships were built in hidden locations far from the trade routes. Defense platforms were constructed around every human colony. Research facilities studied every scrap of information about Vorath weapons and tactics that could be gathered from Council. Broadcasts and battlefield reports. Humanities. Colonies spread quietly into uninhabited systems. New Sol, a farming world with beautiful valleys and clear skies, grew to a population of 2 million. Titan's Edge became a major mining colony, pulling rare metals from asteroid fields. Each new colony was productive and peaceful, contributing to Earth's economy and sending their children to good schools. But each colony also had something the Council species did not know about. Hidden beneath the farmlands of New Sol were weapons bunkers and emergency shelters. Orbiting Titan's Edge were automated defense satellites that looked like navigation beacons. Every civilian freighter had hidden compartments that could be converted to carry Marines and their equipment in a matter of hours. Captain Taiwan knew about some of these preparations. His monitoring station was officially a scientific outpost studying stellar phenomena. In reality, it was an early warning system. Tay and his crew tracked every ship that came within 100 light-years of human space. They analyzed Vorath fleet movements and Council battle tactics. They gathered intelligence that was sent back to Admiral Jin Lee in encrypted packets. Hannah Park managed the data streams, sorting through thousands of alien communications every day. Seung Kim built computer models of battles, trying to understand how both sides fought and where their weaknesses were. "Do you think we'll ever have to fight?" Hannah asked one day during a quiet shift. Tay considered the question carefully. "I hope not," he said finally. "But if we do, I want us to be ready. I want the enemy to regret ever pointing a weapon at a human." The war continued. The Council lost more worlds. The Vorath Empire grew stronger. And humanity watched and waited and prepared. On Earth, in the halls of the United Nations, Ambassador Yumi Choi continued to speak about peace and neutrality. She attended trade conferences and cultural exchanges. She smiled and made polite conversation with Council diplomats who barely concealed their disdain for the coward species. And every night, she went home and reviewed reports from Admiral Jin Lee. Reports about new weapon systems, about fleet deployments, about soldiers training for battles that might never come, about a humanity that had chosen not to fight in someone else's war, but would be absolutely ready if war ever came to them. The galaxy thought it knew what humans were: weak, young, afraid, irrelevant. Galaxy was wrong, but it would take a terrible mistake for the truth to be revealed. And that mistake was coming soon, carried on the ships of an empire that had never known defeat and could not imagine that these quiet, peaceful humans could be anything other than easy prey. In the darkness between the stars, the pieces were moving into position. And humanity, patient and watchful, waited for the moment when the universe would learn what humans were truly capable of when they were finally forced to fight. Strike Commander Horvath of the Vorath Empire stood on the bridge of his warship, studying the holographic display of a small colony world. The planet was green and blue, with scattered cities and vast farmlands. According to his ship's computers, it was called New Sol, and it belonged to the humans. Horvath's species did not smile, but if they could, he would have been smiling. Humans were the perfect target. They were weak, neutral, and had no allies. The Council would not defend them. The Empire needed new slaves and resources, and this world would provide both. "How many inhabitants?" Horvath asked his second officer. "Approximately 2 million, Commander. Mostly civilians. Minimal military presence detected." "Excellent. Begin the attack. Take as many slaves as you can. Destroy anything that resists." The Vorath fleet descended on New Sol without warning. There was no message, no demand for surrender, no chance for negotiation. The first indication that Governor Quan Park had of the attack was when explosions ripped through the colony's capital city. Quan was a decent man who had spent 20 years building New Sol into a peaceful, prosperous home for families who wanted a fresh start. He had 3 grandchildren who lived in the city's eastern district. His wife worked at the university. He had never imagined that he would have to make the decision he was about to make. "Send a distress signal to Earth," he ordered his communication staff as his office shook from another impact. "Tell them we are under attack. Tell them the building's power failed." Emergency lights flickered on as Quan ran to the emergency transmitter, the one that every colony kept for exactly this kind of disaster. His hand shook as he activated it and began to broadcast. "This is Governor Quan Park of New Seoul. We are under attack by Varth forces. They came without warning. They are bombing civilian areas. We cannot." An explosion much closer than the others threw Quan to the floor. When he looked up, he could see the sky through a hole in his office wall. Smoke and fire filled the air. In the distance, he could hear screaming. The attack lasted 6 hours. Vorath soldiers moved through the cities in organized groups, killing anyone who resisted and capturing everyone else. They loaded civilians onto massive transport ships, separating families and beating anyone who protested. Jinho watched from a hiding spot in the agricultural district as soldiers dragged her neighbors from their homes. She was a farmer, a woman in her 30s who had moved to New Seoul to escape the crowded cities of Earth. She had thought this world would be safe for her family. Her husband was already dead, killed when he tried to protect their daughter. Her daughter, only 8 years old, was now on one of those transport ships with thousands of other children. Gina had managed to escape into the fields, but she would never forget the sounds of that day. The screams, the weapons fire, the cold efficiency of the Varth as they destroyed everything she loved. From her hiding place, Gina found an emergency beacon, the kind that farmers used to call for help if their equipment broke down far from the settlements. She activated it and began to record everything she could see. The soldiers executing prisoners who could not work, the ships being loaded with human slaves, the fires burning across the horizon. "If anyone receives this," she whispered into the beacon, "tell Earth what happened here. Tell them the Varth did this. Tell them we need help. Tell them." She stopped speaking as Varth soldiers approached her location. Gina shut off the beacon and ran deeper into the fields, praying that her message would reach someone who cared. 50,000 humans were taken from New Seoul that day. The rest were left on a broken world with destroyed infrastructure, burned cities, and mass graves. The Varth fleet departed, satisfied with their haul of slaves and resources. 3 days later, Gina's message reached monitoring station Olympus-7. Captain Tae Wan was drinking coffee when Hannah Park called him to the communication center with an urgency, in her voice that he had never heard before. When he saw the footage from New Seoul, the coffee cup fell from his hand and shattered on the floor. The images showed everything. Varus soldiers shooting civilians who begged for mercy, children being separated from their parents, entire city blocks burning, bodies in the streets. And through it all, Gina chose quiet, broken voice describing what she was seeing. Soon Kim reviewed the data with shaking hands. 50,000 taken, he said, his voice hollow. Estimated 15,000 dead. The colony is destroyed. Tae stood motionless, watching the footage repeat. He had spent years monitoring the Galactic War from a distance, seeing other species suffer, other worlds burn. But those had been strangers. These were humans. These were his people. "Send everything to Earth immediately," he ordered. "Priority 1. The Admiral needs to see this now." The message reached Earth 12 hours later. Admiral Jin Lee watched the footage once, then watched it again. Her face remained calm, but her hands gripped the edge of her desk so hard that the metal bent slightly. She activated her command network, connecting to every ship, every base, every installation that humanity had built in secret over the past 40 years. "This is Admiral Jin Lee to all United Defense Fleet personnel. Protocol Crimson is now active. We are at war. Recall all civilian ships to protected space. Mobilize all reserve units. Activate all hidden assets. The enemy has attacked New Sol. They have taken our people as slaves. They have murdered our civilians. They will learn what it means to make an enemy of humanity. On Earth, in the Council Embassy, Ambassador Yumi Choi received the news while attending a diplomatic reception. She excused herself politely, walked to a private room, and sent a single message to every Council species. Effective immediately, all human diplomatic personnel are recalled from Council space. All trade agreements are suspended. All cooperative programs are terminated. Humanity thanks the Council for their previous cooperation and wishes them well in their own conflicts. The Pelthian ambassador Ixara called her within minutes. Ambassador Choi, we have heard about New Sol. The Council offers our deepest sympathies. We can mediate with Devarath, perhaps arrange for the return of your people. No, Yumi said quietly. The word was soft, but it carried the weight of iron. There will be no mediation. There will be no negotiation. We asked only to be left alone. We asked only for peace. That courtesy has been revoked. But surely, tell the Council this. Ambassador Ixara, tell them that humanity remembers New Sol. Tell them that we will recover our people, or we will create 50,000 graves for the Varath who took them. Tell them that we asked for nothing except to be left in peace. And when that peace was broken, we became something that your Council has forgotten how to be. What is that? Ixara asked, confused. Dangerous, Yumi replied, and ended the call. Across human space, the transformation began. Civilian factories retooled for military production. Hidden shipyards revealed fleets that had been built in secret. Defense platforms came online around every human world. Soldiers who had been training in quiet bases far from prying eyes moved to their deployment positions. And on New Sol, Gina Cho emerged from hiding to find other survivors gathering together. Governor Guan Park was still alive, injured but determined. Together, they began the grim work of counting their dead and waiting for help that they hoped would come in orbit above Earth. Admiral Jin Lee stood in the command center of her flagship and looked at the deployment map. Her fleet was ready. Her weapons were ready. Her soldiers were ready. The Varath Empire had existed for 300 years. They had conquered hundreds of worlds. They had never known defeat. That was about to change. Strike Commander Horvath received the message from Varath High Command 3 weeks after the New Sol operation. The humans had declared war. He read the communication twice, then began to laugh. War? The humans thought they could fight the Varath Empire? The same humans who had cowered in neutrality for 15 years while the galaxy burned. The same humans who had no military alliances, no battle experience, no understanding of real combat? Prepare Battle Group Talon, Horvath ordered his staff. 300 ships. We will crush their outer colonies first, then move to their home system. This war will be over in a month. His second officer hesitated. Commander, intelligence reports that we know very little about human military capabilities. Perhaps we should send scouts first. They have no capabilities worth knowing about, Horvath interrupted. They are civilians playing at soldiers. We will sweep through their territory like a storm. Battle Group Talon assembled at the edge of human space. 300 warships, enough firepower to destroy entire fleets, enough troops to conquer worlds. Horvath set course for Titan's Edge, a human mining colony that intelligence reported had minimal defenses. The Varath fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the system's outer boundary. Sensors immediately detected human ships in orbit around the colony. 30 vessels, small compared to Varath cruisers. Arranged in a defensive formation, Horvath studied the enemy ships with satisfaction. Only 30 ships? Against 300? This would not even be a real battle. Captain Dong Yun stood on the bridge of the HS Soul's Vengeance, watching the massive Vorath fleet appear on his screens. 30 human ships against 300 Vorath warships. The odds were terrible, and Dong knew that many of his people would die in the next hour. But they would not die for nothing. "All ships, this is Captain Dong," he transmitted to the fleet. "Remember New Seoul. Remember our people. Remember why we fight. Today, we show these bastards what happens when you hurt humanity. Today, we teach them to fear us." The Vorath fleet advanced in their traditional formation, a massive wall of ships designed to overwhelm enemy positions with superior firepower. It was a tactic that had worked for 300 years against every species they had ever fought. "Human vessels, surrender immediately," Horvath broadcast. "You cannot win. We will give you one chance to—" The human response was not a message. It was violence. Soul's Vengeance and her sister ships opened fire simultaneously. The weapons they used were unlike anything the Vorath had encountered before. Instead of energy beams that could be deflected by shields, humans used kinetic weapons. Railguns accelerated solid metal rods to 40% the speed of light. Each rod hit with the force of a nuclear explosion. The first Vorath cruiser to be hit simply ceased to exist. The relativistic projectile punched through its shields like they were paper, through its armor like it was air, and turned the ship into an expanding cloud of debris. Horvath stared at his screens in shock. What weapon was that? Before anyone could answer, 20 more Vorath ships died. Human targeting systems, assisted by artificial intelligence that could calculate trajectories faster than any organic mind, achieved hit rates that should have been impossible. 95% of human shots found their targets. "Return fire!" Horvath screamed. "All ships, return fire!" The Vorath fleet launched their own weapons. Energy beams and plasma torpedoes filled the space between the fleets. Some human ships were hit, their shields flaring and failing under the onslaught. But for every human ship that was damaged, 10 Vorath vessels died. Then the human missiles arrived. They were not simple explosives. They were fusion warheads with adaptive targeting systems. When Vorath ships tried to shoot them down, the missiles dodged. When shields tried to deflect them, the missiles waited and struck at the exact moment when the shields cycled. The detonation sent nuclear fire through the Vorath formation. Captain Hannah Park, who had transferred from Olympus 7 to serve as tactical coordinator for the defense fleet, directed the next phase of the battle from her command ship. She launched drone swarms, thousands of small automated craft that the Vorath sensors barely registered as threats. The drones were not meant to fight. They were meant to die. Each one was packed with explosives and programmed with a single instruction: reach a target and detonate. They swarmed over Vorath carriers like insects, hundreds of small explosions combining to tear open hulls and destroy weapon systems. "They fight without honor," one of Horvath's officers shouted. "They use machines instead of facing us directly." Horvath wanted to respond, but his command ship was shaking from impacts. 40% of his fleet was already destroyed. The humans were not fighting like any enemy he had ever faced. They used speed instead of strength, precision instead of power, and they seemed to have no fear of death. Commander Sunbei proved at last point in the most terrible way possible. His destroyer took critical damage from a Vorath dreadnought's weapons. His ship was dying, life support failing, engines offline. "All hands, abandon ship," Sung ordered his crew. "Get to the escape pods. Move." His crew followed orders, evacuating through emergency hatches while Sung remained at the controls. When the last pod had cleared, he checked his course one final time. The crippled destroyer was drifting directly toward the Vorath dreadnought. That had killed it. Sung fired the ship's emergency thrusters, using the last of its power to accelerate. The dreadnought tried to move, but it was too slow. too massive to dodge quickly. From New Seoul, Soong whispered into his transmitter, knowing that Hana Park and the rest of the fleet would hear him. For our children. For our future. The destroyer hit the dreadnought at high speed. Both ships vanished in a fireball that lit up the entire battlefield. The explosion was so massive that nearby Vara ships were damaged by the debris. The human fleet saw their comrades sacrifice and fought even harder. There was no retreat, no surrender, no mercy. Ships that lost their weapons used themselves as weapons. Crews that were outnumbered boarded enemy vessels and fought hand to hand in the corridors. Horvath watched his fleet die around him. 300 ships had entered this system. After only 30 minutes of combat, less than 100 remained functional. The humans had lost ships too, but they had made every loss count for something. Retreat, Horvath finally ordered, his pride shattered by the impossible reality in front of him. All ships, retreat to faster-than-light speed. Withdraw immediately. The surviving Varath vessels turned and ran. Only 12 made it out of the system. The rest were destroyed by human missiles that chased them even as they tried to escape. Captain Dong-yun stood among the wreckage of the battlefield, his own ship heavily damaged but still fighting. Around him floated the debris of more than 280 Varath warships. 18 human ships had been destroyed, including Commander Soong Bei's heroic sacrifice. Titan's Edge is secure, Dong reported to Admiral Jin Lee on Earth. The enemy has been defeated. But Admiral, they will be back. And they will bring more ships. Jin Lee's voice was calm over the transmission. Let them come, Captain. Let them bring their entire fleet. We will be ready. And we will keep killing them until they learn to leave us alone. The 12 surviving Vora ships limped back to their nearest base. The crews were traumatized, speaking of impossible weapons and enemies who did not fear death. They called the humans demons, monsters, something wrong and unnatural. Strike Commander Horvath made his report to Varath High Command. And for the first time in 300 years, a Varath officer had to explain a complete defeat. The Empire had underestimated these humans. They had thought them weak. They had been terribly, fatally wrong. And across the galaxy, on monitoring stations and council ships and neutral worlds, other species listened to the reports from Titan's Edge. They heard about the impossible battle, the impossible victory, the impossible humans who had done what should not be possible. The galaxy was beginning to realize that humanity had been hiding something during all those years of neutrality. Something dangerous, something powerful. Something that was now fully unleashed and coming for the Varath. With the fury of a species that had been pushed too far, the war was just beginning, but the outcome was already becoming clear. The Varath Empire had made a fatal mistake when they attacked New Seoul. They had given humanity a reason to fight. The news from Titan's Edge spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Varath Empire, which had never known defeat, had lost almost an entire battle group to a species that most of the galaxy considered weak and irrelevant. In council chambers, diplomats who had looked down on humanity now watched their screens in stunned silence. Ambassador Ixara sent an urgent message to Earth. Ambassador Choi, the council wishes to express its amazement at your military success. We would like to discuss how humanity developed such advanced weapons technology. Perhaps we can arrange a meeting. The response from Earth was not from Ambassador Yumi Choi. Instead, it came from Rena Song, Earth's chief scientist. And it was broadcast on every council frequency, where everyone could hear it. You wondered why we stayed out of your war, Rena said. Standing in a laboratory surrounded by weapon systems and computer displays. Many of you thought we were cowards. You thought we were too primitive to understand the stakes. You thought we were afraid. She gestured to the equipment around her. You were wrong about everything. We weren't afraid of the war. We were preparing for the possibility that the war would come to us. While the Council fought with energy weapons that were perfected 1,000 years ago, we weaponized our desperation. We built new technologies because we had to. We trained our people because we knew that one day, someone might force us to fight. The broadcast showed images of human shipyards, research facilities, training centers. All the things that had been hidden during the years of neutrality. All the preparations that no one had noticed. The Varath Empire made a choice when they attacked New Sol, Rena continued. They chose to find out what humans are capable of when you hurt us. They are learning. And we will make sure the lesson is thorough. Admiral Jin Lee did not wait for the galaxy to finish processing this information. She launched Operation Righteous Fury the next day. Human strike fleets, led by Captains Taewan, Haimin, and Jae Kang, appeared simultaneously at 6 different Vara systems. They did not target military bases first. They targeted supply lines. Automated freighters carrying food, fuel, and ammunition were destroyed or captured. Shipyards building new Varath vessels were reduced to scrap metal. Communication stations were obliterated, leaving Varath commanders unable to coordinate with each other. The Varath had built their empire on overwhelming force and slow, grinding advances. They were not prepared for an enemy that moved faster, struck harder, and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Captain Taewan commanded the strike on the Varath fuel depot at Kerrigan Station. His fleet arrived, destroyed the station's defenses in 4 minutes, and was gone before the Varath garrison even finished sending a distress call. Without that fuel depot, 17 Varath fleets were stranded, unable to refuel their ships. Captain Hyman led the attack on a Varath command center. Her ships used electronic warfare to blind the station's sensors, then deploy boarding teams who fought through the corridors in brutal close combat. When the human Marines withdrew, they took with them computer cores containing Vara strategic plans, fleet deployments, and command codes. Captain Jae Kang specialized in what the Varath found most terrifying, psychological warfare. His fleet arrived at systems where the Varath held slaves from conquered species. Instead of destroying everything, human soldiers fought to free the captives. Jay personally led the assault on a slave transport that was carrying survivors from New Sol. "You are safe now," he told the freed humans, many of them injured and traumatized. "You are going home, and the monsters who took you will pay for every moment you suffered." But Jay did not just free the slaves. He made sure that Vara survivors from each battle were allowed to escape. He wanted them to run back to their empire and tell everyone what they had seen. He wanted the fear to spread. The freed slaves were not the only ones sent home. Human intelligence officers like Hannah Park assembled detailed records of Varath war crimes, videos of the attack on New Sol, audio recordings of Varath commanders ordering civilians to be killed, lists of every human who had died or been taken. These records were broadcast throughout Varath space. Every slave species, every conquered world, every soldier in the Varath military saw what their empire had done. And they saw what humanity was doing in response. Before each battle, human ships broadcast the same message. Captain Dong Yun, whose voice had become famous across the galaxy, read the names of the dead from New Sol. All 15,000 names. It took hours, but he read every single one before the fighting began. "These are the people you killed," he said to the Varath. "Remember their names." Because we do. The Varath Empire tried to adapt. They sent larger fleets, used different tactics, studied captured human weapons. Nothing worked. Humanity had spent 40 years preparing for this war. The Varath were learning that starting a fight with a species that had time to prepare was a fatal mistake. Then researcher Nari Yoon completed Project Godfall, and the war entered its final phase. Nari was a quiet woman who preferred working with equations and machines rather than people. She had spent 8 years developing a weapon that was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. She called them relativistic kill missiles. The missiles were not particularly large or complicated. They were simply automated drones equipped with powerful engines and basic navigation systems. But they could accelerate over months of flight to 90%, the speed of light. At that speed, mass became a weapon. A small missile traveling at 0.9 c carried more kinetic energy than dozens of nuclear bombs. And nothing could stop it. No shield could deflect something moving that fast. No weapon could shoot it down. Evasion was impossible because by the time you saw it coming, it had already hit. Admiral Jin Lee selected the target carefully. Krell Prime was a major Vorath staging world, home to shipyards, military bases, and command centers. It was heavily defended and deep inside Vorath territory. Taking it with conventional forces would cost thousands of human lives. Nari's missiles had been launched 3 months earlier, accelerating in deep space where no one could detect them. Now they arrived at Krell Prime, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed. The Vorath sensors detected strange readings half a second before impact. That was not enough time to sound an alarm. It was barely enough time to realize something was wrong. The first missile hit the planet's largest shipyard. The impact released energy equivalent to 100 nuclear weapons. The shipyard and everything within 50 kilometers simply ceased to exist. The shockwave destroyed everything within 200 kilometers. More missiles followed. Military bases were obliterated. Command centers were reduced to craters. The orbital defense platforms, pride of the Vorath fleet, were destroyed so completely that no debris larger than a fist remained. When the bombardment ended, Krell Prime was no longer a planet. It was an expanding field of asteroids and dust. Everything the Vorath had built there was gone. The 70 million inhabitants, military and civilian, were dead. The galaxy watched in horror. The Council sent urgent messages to Earth, demanding an explanation for such destruction. Ambassador Yumi Choi responded with cold precision. Krell Prime was a legitimate military target. It was the staging point for attacks on human colonies. It built the ships that attacked New Sol. It trained the soldiers who killed our people. We gave the Vorath every opportunity to avoid this war. They chose violence. They are learning the consequences of that choice. The Vorath Empire, which had existed for 300 years without ever retreating, began to break. Fleets surrendered to human commanders rather than face destruction. Entire worlds laid down their weapons and begged for mercy. Subject species that had been enslaved for generations rose up in rebellion. Strike Commander Horvath, who had ordered the attack on New Sol, was captured during a desperate last stand at his final stronghold. Captain Hannah Park led the boarding team that took him prisoner. Why? Horvath asked as human soldiers put him in restraints. Why do you fight this way? We would have enslaved your people and moved on. You are destroying our entire empire over one colony. Hannah looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death. That's why you lost, she said. To you, New Sol was just one colony. To us, it was 50,000 people who deserved to live in peace. Every single one of them mattered. And we will kill every last one of you to make sure you understand that. Horvath was brought to Earth to stand trial, along with 43 other Vorath commanders who had participated in the New Sol attack. The trials were public and broadcast throughout the galaxy. Evidence was presented in meticulous detail. Witnesses testified about the horrors they had endured. The verdicts were unanimous. Guilty of war crimes. Guilty of crimes against sapient beings. Guilty of murder. The sentences were delivered by Judge Minister Tae Min, who had lost a daughter at New Sol. You will spend the rest of your lives rebuilding what you destroyed, he told the convicted Vorath. You will help the survivors of New Sol make their world whole again. You will see every day what your violence cost. And you will never forget. Across the galaxy, species that had fought the Vorath for 15 years watched in amazement as humanity ended the war in 18 months. The impossible had happened. The Vorath Empire surrendered 18 months after attacking New Sol. What had been a mighty force spanning hundreds of star systems was now a collection of broken remnants. Their fleets destroyed, their leaders imprisoned, their subject species freed or claiming independence. The survivors came to Earth with white flags and desperate pleas for mercy. Ambassador Yumi Choi met them in the same chamber where she had once declared humanity's neutrality. But the woman who faced the Vorath delegation now was different from the peaceful diplomat who had spoken of trade and cooperation. She had watched the footage from New Sol too many times. She had read the names of the dead. She had changed, and so had humanity. "These are Earth's terms," Yumi said, her voice carrying the weight of every human life that had been lost. Complete disarmament of all Vorath military forces. All weapons platforms destroyed. All warships decommissioned. You will keep only what is necessary to maintain basic security. The Vorath delegates trembled, but said nothing. They knew they had no position to negotiate from. Second, Yumi continued. Reparations to the survivors of New Sol. You will provide resources, labor, and financial compensation to rebuild what you destroyed. This debt will take generations to repay. Your children will be paying for the crimes of their parents. Third, immediate release of all slaves taken from human worlds. They will be returned to us within 30 days. Any delay will be considered an act of war, and we will resume hostilities. Fourth, all Vorath commanders who participated in attacks on civilian populations will face human justice. They will be tried, convicted based on evidence, and sentenced according to human law. You do not get to escape consequences by claiming you were following orders. The Vorath chief delegate, a scarred veteran who had seen his entire fleet destroyed by Captain Dong Yun's forces, finally spoke. These terms are harsh. They are just, Yumi replied. Be grateful that you are receiving justice instead of vengeance. Many humans wanted us to do to your worlds what you did to New Sol. I argued against that. I argued that we should be better than you. Do not make me regret that decision. The Vorath signed a treaty that afternoon. Within weeks, human ships began returning with freed slaves. The reunions were emotional and painful. Many captives had been tortured or worked nearly to death. Some had not survived. The thousands came home, brought back by the military that had fought so hard to free them. Gina Cho was among the returnees. The farmer who had hidden in the fields of New Sol had survived 6 months of Vorath captivity through sheer determination to see her daughter again. When she stepped off the transport ship on Earth and saw her child waiting for her, both of them collapsed into tears that would not stop for hours. But while humanity celebrated its victory and mourned its losses, the Galactic Council faced an unexpected problem. Admiral Ixara, speaking for the Council's military command, sent a formal request to Earth. Humanity has demonstrated military capabilities far beyond what we believed possible, the message stated. The Council is still engaged in conflicts with aggressive species throughout the galaxy. We formally request that Earth join the war effort against our mutual enemies. Together, we could bring peace too. Admiral Jin Lee interrupted the message before Ixara could finish. Her response was broadcast on all Council frequencies. No, she said simply. We told you from the beginning, we do not fight your wars. We fight our wars. The Vorath attacked us, and we responded. Your enemies have not attacked us. We will not fight them. But you have the power to help, Ixara protested. Species are dying. Worlds are being destroyed. You could make a difference. We could, Jin agreed. But we choose not to. We are not the galaxy's police force. We are not here to solve your problems. You made choices about how to fight your wars. You chose old strategies and old weapons. You chose to keep fighting the same way for 15 years, even though it was not working. Those were your choices. The consequences are yours as well. The council chamber erupted in protests and arguments. Some species understood humanity's position. Others called it selfish, cowardly, a betrayal of galactic civilization. Captain Taiwan, who had been promoted to diplomatic liaison after his success in the war, offered an alternative during a tense council meeting. "We will not fight your wars," he told the assembled ambassadors, "but we will help you defend yourselves. Earth will share defensive technology and tactical doctrine with any species that is committed to protecting civilian populations. What is the cost?" One ambassador asked suspiciously. "The cost is following human rules of engagement," Tay replied. "Proportional response. Protection of non-combatants. Accountability for war crimes. If you want our help, you fight wars the way we do. You target military installations, not civilians. You take prisoners instead of executing them. You hold your commanders responsible for their actions." Some species immediately agreed. They had watched humanity defeat the Varth with precision strikes and minimal civilian casualties despite fighting an enemy that had shown no such restraint. They wanted to learn those tactics. Other species refused. They were not willing to limit their military options. They believed that war should be total, that mercy was weakness, that the ends justified any means. These species continued fighting their conflicts in the old ways. The galaxy began to divide. Some adopted humanity's doctrine of brutal restraint, combining overwhelming force with strict rules about when and how to use it. Others clung to old methods, fighting total wars that devastated entire systems. Humanity watched this division with careful attention, but did not interfere. They had made their offer. What the galaxy did with it was not their responsibility. On New Sol, the real work of rebuilding had begun. Governor Quan Park had survived the initial attack and captivity, and he returned to lead the reconstruction effort. The Varth prisoners of war arrived in chains, and Quan put them to work exactly as the peace treaty specified. "You destroyed our cities," he told Strike Commander Horvath as the former Varth leader was assigned to a construction crew. "You will rebuild them, brick by brick, building by building. And every day, you will see the people whose lives you tried to destroy. You will see them thriving despite what you did to them." Horvath worked in silence, breaking rocks and hauling materials alongside other convicted Varth. Around him, New Sol slowly came back to life. New buildings rose from the ruins. Families returned to rebuild their homes. Children played in parks that were being replanted with earth, trees, and local vegetation. The memorial wall was built in the center of the capital city. It stretched for hundreds of meters, listing all 50,000 people who had been taken by the Varth. Some had returned. Many had not. Their names were carved in stone that would last for millennia. Above the wall, an inscription was placed in Korean first, then in 100 other languages, including Vorath. "We will remember. We will rebuild. We will never be victims again." Gina Cho visited the wall often, running her fingers over the names of neighbors who had not survived. She had started farming again, growing crops in the same fields where she had once hidden from Vorath soldiers. The land was healing, and so was she. Slowly. In Earth's solar system, monitoring station Olympus 7 continued its work. Captain Soon Kim had replaced Taewon as commander after Tae moved to diplomatic service. The station still tracked every ship that came near human space. The vigilance had not ended just because the war was over. Humanity continued expanding quietly into unclaimed systems. New colonies were established. Trade routes were secured. Defense platforms were built around every human world. The lessons of New Seoul had not been forgotten. Never again would humanity be unprepared. Admiral Jin Lee retired from active military service and became an advisor to the United Defense Fleet. In her final speech to the officer corps, she shared the philosophy that had guided humanity through the war. "We are not the strongest species in the galaxy," she said. "We are not the oldest or the wisest. But we are the most dangerous when we need to be. Not because we love war, but because we understand its cost. We know what we fight for. We know what we protect. And we will never, ever forget what happens when someone forces us to choose between peace and survival." The galaxy had learned that lesson the hard way. The Vorath Empire was gone, shattered by a species that most had dismissed as weak and irrelevant. The council species who had looked down on humanity now approached Earth with respect and sometimes fear. Ambassador Yumi Choi continued her work, negotiating trade agreements and cultural exchanges. But she always made one thing clear to every species she dealt with: we prefer peace. We will always choose peace if it is offered. But if you force us to choose war, you will regret making us that offer. And Earth continued to wait and watch. Human ships patrolled the borders of human space. Research facilities developed new technologies. Soldiers trained for battles that might never come. The galaxy had changed. It had learned that humanity was not a species to be ignored or dismissed. They had learned that the quiet, peaceful humans who talked about neutrality and trade were also capable of devastating violence when their people were threatened. Most importantly, the galaxy had learned a simple truth. Earth stayed out of wars not from fear or weakness,